My name's Veronica Strang, and I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I work partly on material culture, but most specifically on material. So my particular interest is in water, and I've been writing about different aspects of water for, I guess it must be over 30 years now. Water, of course, is a lovely topic to work on because you can really go across a whole spectrum, from the kind of crunchy political conflicts over water, issues of water management, water shortages, the whole kind of environmental set of issues that we're all painfully familiar with these days, right through to the more kind of symbolic meanings attached to water and how it takes us into sort of deep cultural ideas about the spirit and how the world works. And then, of course, there's all the wonderful science of water and its extraordinary properties. So it's a very wide subject in which you can come at it in a lot of different ways. Water beings are a sort of way of understanding the flows of the world, but they also provide a very easily understood metaphor for those kinds of movements of ideas and notions of flow. So, they also contain wisdom. They also talk about the flow of knowledge through the world, as well as water, and if you believe in spiritual things, also the spirit. So they're a good way to conceptualize all of that. So if you go to parts of the world like Australia, they're very beneficent creatures by and large, but they're also extremely dangerous because they also generate ancestral law and they punish people who transgress it. So you get a lot of stories about people being swallowed by them because they've gone to somewhere sacred without proper respect, or they're not supposed to be there, or they're being greedy with fishing, whatever. But generally they are the bringers of life, but they're not soft, they're very powerful. If, on the other hand, you come to this part of the world, it's got more to do with religious transitions from nature religions through to semi-human deities, as in the Greeks and Romans, to more human pantheons, then to monotheisms. And that has to do with humans starting to think more about dominion over the world as they form larger, more hierarchical societies, but more to the point, more instrumental relationships with nature. So your most beneficent water beings are those of the nature religions, where people work in partnership with a non-human and they feel a sense of parity. It's a reciprocal partnership, and you get the real sense of that working in Aboriginal Australia, that the non-human and the sentient landscape is actually a partner with humankind. But when you start to move into societies that bring in agriculture and then irrigation and start forming the landscape a lot more instrumentally, you see a movement in religious thought away from worshipping local water beings and other nature deities into deities who live in places like Olympus, Valhalla, whatever, and then into a far-off heaven. And the closer you get to the big patriarchal religions, the more the serpent beings are demonized, because, of course, you get that whole period in the medieval world where Christianity was extremely militant in repressing the nature religion. So you get a fluorescence of dragon slayers, and of course you've got some wonderful objects here in the museum, and you're living with God's exhibition. You've got a nice panel with St. George slaying the dragon. You've got a very rare St. George, a black St. George slaying the dragon, and you've got some other nice icons from Russia. So you get this kind of sudden emergence of the saintly heroes slaying the infidel or slaying the serpent, and fundamentally it's the same thing. It's about asserting Christian beliefs and subsuming those pagan nature worshippers. But of course they keep bubbling up, and we still have strong pagan religions in many parts of the world, and indeed in this country, and you still got people having a very important discourse about how we relate to nature. So you get linkages between pagan religious groups, environmental groups, and of course the feminist groups for whom religious patriarchy might be less appealing. Water serpents are fascinating in that, on the one hand, they're incredibly diverse. They are all shapes and forms and, so forth. And they, so I was just talking a little bit about some of the objects you've got here in the museum. You've got that wonderful turquoise Mayan serpent, for example, which is a double-headed, jaguar-headed, it's the most gorgeous object. And then you've got that wonderful Japanese articulated dragon in the Living with Gods exhibition, which is just beautiful. So they're very different. You get them with horns, you get them with plumes, you get them with feathers, You get them with fishy kind of characteristic wolf heads up in the west coast of America, whale-like bodies if you get to the north and Canada. They come in very different forms, and what they tend to do is absorb the forms of their local environment and the local flora and fauna. So there's one theory, for example, that typical rainbow serpents in Australia absorb the pipefish, which has a very dragony type head. And it's just, but mostly they're snake-like, and the reason that they're snake-like in some form or serpentine is that they represent the properties of water. So on the one hand, they have a lot of things in common. They're serpentine, they are often coloured as water, they move like water, they have the powers of water to generate life and take life. They often have a lot of jaws and teeth and ideas about swallowing and consuming and so forth. And sometimes they're either spitting out humans or they're consuming. And there's that notion of it being something that water can do, like a tsunami swallows whole villages and so forth. So they represent the materiality of water, which is why they have a kind of family resemblance. And at the same time, they pick up local flora and fauna. And that's partly because they are made out of people thinking with water and thinking with local flora and fauna, and partly because in generating the life in the local environment, that's what they're generating: local flora, local fauna, and of course, as we started off talking, human beings as well. So they have a tremendous power in representing not only capacities to generate and take life, but also to connect organic life, because they represent the fact that all organic living kinds depend on water, and in that sense they're all connected by water.